Hey,
All
Jono.
right. Ah, look at this. We're back on the air. This is
How
great.
about that?
I got to say, no. I've really missed you, and I know that I've dragged you onto the show today because you've been sick. You've been away. You've been in Israel. I want to hear about that.
Yep.
Just for everyone that's tuning in, I'm going to be making Ross talk, and he shouldn't be talking because as you're about to find out, his voice is still recovering. He's fine. Look at him. He's absolutely fine. G'day, Dave. Dave just got on. G'day. How are you, mate? And
All right.
Dave knows all about it because he was there. Did Dave get sick as well?
Nope. Dave was the only one, I think.
Man of Steel.
Man of Steel didn't have anything. And really, I felt fine the whole time. Feel fine now. My voice is not 100%, but this is good exercise for me because I'm going live Saturday morning to teach my class.
I hope you are because
God
I
willing.
hope I don't ruin it. I hope I don't ruin your voice. But g'day, Timothy and Kenny. Timothy Thompson. Oh, everyone's tuning. Oh, Cassandra, there we are.
Good.
Everyone's tuning
Got the
in.
whole gang back.
Karen, there's Karen. Everyone, now this is good. Everyone's getting on YouTube and watching this because you know that on Restream we don't get to identify the comments unless you are on YouTube. So go to Ross's YouTube page.
Yep.
What's the details?
It's youtube.com/Ross K. Nichols TV.
Yeah, Ross K. Nichols TV. Marianne said, "Hey, Ross, you got your voice back. Not for long, Marianne. I'm going to make him talk for too long, and then he won't be able to talk.
Everyone stretch your hands toward the screen and pray that my voice is strengthened even as I speak tonight."
There you go. This is great. So, g'day to everybody, and I'm really glad that you're tuning in. If you are on Facebook, just let us know. Just drop your name in the comments so that we can see who you are. If you're going to comment, we'd love to hear your questions, comments. It's all good stuff. As I mentioned, it's been a while since we've been live because, among other things, Ross he's been away with the Tylers and a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
You guys went to Israel.
We did.
You went to Jordan. A little bit of, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about some of that yet, but I know what we can talk about.
Yep.
And what I do want you to give us an update on is why did we go to Israel? Why were you in Jerusalem? And what were you presenting? Go for it. Give us an update.
Okay. So the trip started very simply, built around a conference that was hosted at the Albright Institute in the Paulus House in Jerusalem. It was a conference called Conrad Schick in His World. Conrad Schick, the sometimes called the first great scholar of Jerusalem. But there was a conference in honor of his many, many works called Conrad Schick in His World. And so I submitted a paper early last year to an academic committee, and my paper was picked up. And what I submitted, what I proposed, my paper proposal was that I would present a paper about Conrad Schick's constellation of contributions toward the discovery and decipherment of the Siloam inscription. So, long story short, my paper was accepted. That's what I presented. Now, Jono, the lectures are currently being edited. They were live streamed, but they wouldn't allow us to share the link because it was I think they thought somehow that they wanted to keep it in a close-knit community. So they did stream it. They did record it. They are editing those videos, and hopefully those videos will be back. But my lecture was well received. I think it went very well. In fact, Professor Ronnie Reich, who is one of the great scholars in Jerusalem, one of the great scholars of our day, particularly around archaeology, and even more specifically towards the city of David, Siloam. In fact, he's writing a book right now on the Siloam tunnel and surrounding areas. And he told me that his book, which is only going to be in Hebrew, he's going to include my research as a note within his book. And here's the cool thing for you and I, Jono, is that in my research, I prove that it is thanks to Moses Wilhelm Shapira that
Okay.
we now know he was the first to discover what the Siloam inscription said, what it means that two teams of builders were working from either end. And he was the first to correctly decipher the distance of 1,200 cubits, where other scholars said 1,000. So anyway, it was well received. That's going to be published. In addition to that, I intend to publish the article. Either I'm going to submit it for consideration to the
Hmm.
PEF, to the German Association Journal for the Study of Palestine, and a few other journals. Ronnie Reich has said that he thinks there's not going to be any problem with it being published,
That's
and
great.
it's going to be published in a book. So that's the update on why we went. But in addition to that, you were going to ask something, or you want me
No,
to
I was
quickly?
just going to say, no, this is very exciting. Before we get to the addition of that, the information that you were presenting, Conrad Schick and his world, these are people that are very involved and understand, the history of Conrad Schick and everything that he was involved in. But did they know? Did it come to a surprise to them? Was it new information? The
Absolutely.
involvement that Wilhelm
Yeah.
Moses Shapira played in that particular discovery and other um, fingers that he had in the pie as well.
Yeah, and it was totally unknown, I would say, to everyone who was there. And get
Hmm.
this, one of the reasons this is important, obviously there's a lot riding on this, because one of the things that people put forward when they talk about the Moses scroll, um, a lot of people think, Moses Shapira, he's just a shop owner. I mean, what does he know about text of the
Mm.
Bible? What could he possibly know? But what this goes a long way to suggest that Shapira was a very capable scholar. In fact, more capable, evidently, than Neubauer, than Sayce, than Condor. He beat them all. So
Mm.
if we can establish that Shapiro was quite capable in reading Paleo Hebrew, then quite possibly his reputation might not be maybe looked down upon, because I have a lot more. There's a lot more where that came from, if we can say that.
So he wasn't just a antiquities dealer with a bookshop. He wasn't just a correspondent at the British Museum. He wasn't just. He was also quite the scholar, and you're highlighting that.
Yeah,
Dave just said Ross stunned them. Dave was there, of course, and he had a glowing report. Doug just tuned in and said, "Love your videos." Thank you, Doug. We love you too. Oh, by
that's
the way,
right.
while I'm saying good day to people, let me just give a shout out because I said I would do this weeks ago. Kevin and Jasmine Fernstrom. G'day, you guys. Been
Hey,
chatting with
Kevin and
them of late.
Jasmine.
Yeah, I
Now,
think she
now
just
who
had a
are
birthday
Kevin and
recently.
Jasmine? Are these just friends of yours? Are they going on the
They're,
tour? What?
they're in the Ozark. Oh, they would love to come on the tour, but I don't. I think they've got 4 kids. I'm not sure they're quite ready to do that yet. But
Hey, speaking of the tour, look, I'm going to put this up. Join Ross and Jono on one of their Tanakh tours. There's the web address. It's
there you
easy
go.
to remember, Jono. TanakhTours.com. People can join us in Egypt and Jordan, or Israel, or both,
Or
and we
both.
encourage you to do that. I mean, look, seats are
This year,
filling up
okay,
fast.
so they really are. Todd was asking me, g'day Todd, was asking me just recently if there is still room available on the Egypt Jordan tour. There is, but it is particularly filling up fast. So as Ross just mentioned, we're doing 2 legs of the Tanakh tour this year. Of course, Egypt and Jordan first, kicking off on the 31st of October, and that runs back to back to Israel when
Yep,
we cross over from Jordan on the 12th of November, I do believe. So details on TanakhTours.com. Go there and put your deposit down because honestly, it really is filling quite fast. And I've got a bunch of people to reply to as well. And believe me, I will get to the g'day Agnes, who just signed up for the Israel tour. And also, who else have we got here? I've got to get back to a bunch of people. All right. Anyway, but Ross, no, there was something else you just put up on the screen. What is this?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that's a way that people can support the stream. Now,
there it is.
I think Jono that this takes people to the Patreon page. I don't know if they can click that or if they have to scan it with their
You can
phone,
scan
but
it. Little
if
QR
they
code,
choose.
scan that, go to the Patreon page and subscribe, because there's a bunch of stuff that Ross is putting on his Patreon page that you're not going to get on programs like this. If you want to, the more, well, what kind of stuff, Ross?
Well, what we're going to do is one of the things that I've made a commitment to do, and I haven't done it yet. What we're going to do is the two of us, are going to talk about and show a video just to the Patreon members of our trip when we were in Jordan and we came upon a cave, potentially one of the caves that is in the running
I have
uh,
that video,
for
don't I?
where the Shapira scroll. But let me tell
Right.
you, speaking of
I
that,
got to get that to you. Yep.
when we went to Jordan, it was Bridget, my wife, Dave
Hmm.
and Patty Tyler, and Ron Vanderham. We went
G'day, Ron.
to we went to Jordan, and one of the things we were doing was a survey of a potential area where the cave may possibly be. Thanks to first of all, Dave had some fantastic satellite imagery produced for us. So this is high tech. You
Oh,
know, Dave's
okay.
business and Dave and Patty's business, they deal with high level contractors, let's just say, in the government. And so they were able to get us some really nice, good photography, satellite imagery, which we then involved Daniel Wright. And Daniel Wright was able to help us really narrow down our field of search. Now, on top of that, we went to, I won't go too much into this, but we went to some sites that you and I will include on the Tanakh tour. Ancient
Yes.
Aurora,
Hmm.
just all kind of cool stuff. Back
Did you
to the
go when you guys were there? Did you go to Taban, by the way? Tel Taban?
yes, we did. Yeah, we did. We went
Yeah,
back there, and I think Dave Tyler found him a piece of basalt, and
that's what you
where
want.
when we went, same thing.
Yeah.
But this Patreon page, one of the things that I really have always wanted to do is do everything that I can to provide top quality material and research at no charge. And this helps to support me to do that. So one of the things I'll be doing before the end of this month is all the members of Patreon who want a copy of my Hebrew vocabulary book, these are the words, I'm
Mm.
sending that free or at no additional charge for members of the Patreon. Of course, if they say, I already have that, but I need a good copy of the Moses scroll or fragments of a leather manuscript. In other words, I'm going to give gifts. I'm going to be able to
Oh, this is
give
true. So
back.
depending on the level of support that you give on Ross's Patreon, you get some goodies. Not only do you get, hey, there's a level where you get a discount on the Tanakh tour, isn't there?
Yeah, I think you and I agreed that if someone is giving $20 a month, then they get a discount of $100 on the Tanakh tour. So anyway, there are different things that they can
Practically
do that
giving it away,
they don't
Ross.
feel. I'm telling
Practically
you,
giving it
I'm
away.
going to grab something. I'll be right back. I'm
You,
listening.
you go grab that thing. I'm going to say good day to Timothy Daly. He said, I imagine you're always optimistic, but have you had any developments in trying to locate the scroll? So, as you just heard, Timothy, they did go over to Jordan to a particular area on the north face of the Wadi Mujib um, to have a closer look at some of the caves. Now, when we were there in November, yes, we did see a particular prominent cave, and Ross did go in with our tour guide Aladdin. Got some great footage of
Yep.
inside the cave. That's mind blowing. When you see the inside of this particular cave, you immediately, whether this is the cave or not, and really it might be, but whether this is the cave or not, you can. What it does establish is that this particular face of the wadi has a strata that does support
Yeah.
these kind of caves. And g'day, Frankie.
Hey,
And
Frankie
so,
and DJ.
and
Oh, it's
DJ.
DJ. That's who it
Oh, it
is.
is
It's DJ.
DJ. G'day, DJ. How are you, mate? And
Look,
Chuck.
I'm glad he included me because I know you're his man. So I just feel honored to be in DJ's company. No,
There
but
you
we
go.
just to answer the question,
Mm.
it's will we find the cave? It's very difficult to say. The cave we went in on our examination this time one of the things that I think the Tylers and I both agree, the cave that we're looking for would be further to the east. What the cave we went in when you and I were there, we think it's a little bit further west than the one that's described in the documentation. So our goal
Really?
this time was to move east. Yeah, do
So
what?
hang on. So let me ask you. So your suspicion, your speculation is that the cave. Now, dear listeners, again, if you want to see the footage, are you going to put the footage of the interior of this cave on your Patreon?
Yeah, only on
Is it?
Patreon, though. You have to understand, I don't want to publish that out in the public and someone
No,
download
no.
it. It's going to be for a small group
It's
of people, because the ones who are supporting allow me to do things like go on these
mhm.
expeditions and help me, pay for gas
And I've got
money.
to send you the video of the outside. But in any
Yeah,
case, but what you're saying, what I'm hearing from you now, having gone back there a few weeks ago and done a little bit more investigation and some trekking around on that the wall of the wadi, is that you believe that the cave where the Moses scroll was found may be a little further to the east. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
yeah, I do actually. I think that may be the case, and particularly because we have like 5 accounts that I've found where Shapira describes the location of the cave. When he hears from the
Mm,
Bedouin about the discovery location, he goes, "Oh, I know that. I know that place," because he had been there in 1875 with a scholar by the name, or from Uppsala, by the name of Omkvist. And he says, I know that place well. It's this far from Aurora. And he gives a certain definition east of Aurora. So what Dave and I did, Dave and Patty and I particularly, and Ron on our expedition, was we did some research. In 1865, if it says a certain time frame from Aurora, you're not going to be in a car, you're going to be on horseback at best. So what we did was we drew an arc that said this is how far you could get on horseback in this amount of time. And so we've now narrowed the focus. We know that it's got to be east of Aurora, and that's where we spent most of our time. Now listen, that was not easy to get there, Jono, because we had to get we got we got stopped basically by some authorities like
oh, you did.
police police or
Mm,
something, mainly because you're on roads that are not really roads. You're kind of going
mm,
through the outback, if you will. But anyway, they did allow us. They just said, look, if you want to try it in your van, go ahead. And we did. So we were able to navigate some areas that we weren't able to do in the tour bus, obviously.
mm.
But long story short, we do feel like we've got a nice area. We did get some footage, we did get some details, we did learn some things, and we've got some places to go back to. So
All right.
so this is one aspect of the research. One aspect is, where was the scroll when it was discovered? Well, that's
Mm,
that's worth a certain amount for me. But here's a question mainly around Timothy's point, Timothy Daly. You're always optimistic, but have you had any developments in trying to locate the scrolls themselves? It's a whole nother question, and it's a very good question. Where is it now? Because one thing that you would almost need to do, a lot of people say, well, the evidence in your book or in Don Dershowitz's book is very important. But, until we find it and we can do dating, we can do
mm,
scientific studies, does it really matter? I mean, your arguments are only worth so much if you can't find the scroll. I have some very good clues, let's just put it that way. And I've actually employed my son, Seth. You know, Seth. He's
yeah.
helping me design some video and some things that are going to be forthcoming first on Patreon
Excellent.
that's going to try to enlist people in searching for those scrolls. We
Great.
know we have 3 places that we've narrowed down with a high probability. Let's just say you have to rule these 3 places out or find them. And I think that this is very good. This is about a 20-page document from
Hmm.
another very reputable, probably the brightest of our scroll hunt team, and these are his ideas. It's called Shapira Manuscript Location. Uh, I can't share that publicly. It's not mine to share. But we're working. What
Okay.
I'm saying is, we're working together, Jono. It's a
And
very big
narrowing it down.
effort because
And on,
those who are in the know have basically come to the same idea that, listen, if we're going to find it, we have to pool our knowledge. We have to pool our resources.
That's great. So let me just tell everyone, if you're coming on the Tanakh tour, and particularly the Egypt Jordan leg of the Tanakh tour, when we get to Jordan, we are going to some of these places. You're going to be able to see some of these places. We are going to go to the Wadi Mujib. We're going to be pointing out some of these caves. We may, I don't know, we may even be able to go into one of them. We'll talk about that
Yeah,
later.
we've
We
got
don't
some
want
ideas on that.
There's some ideas on that, and we don't want to do anything dangerous, but we're going to look into that. We're going to be going to Diban. Now, the reason why we mentioned Diban, and you mentioned that Dave picked up a piece of basalt there, just probably not indifferent to this one.
Ah, yeah, there you go.
There you go. Now,
Uh-huh.
why are we picking up a piece of basalt in Tel Diban, Ross?
Because Dibon, it's spelled variously. Most Bibles would probably spell it Diban, but Dibon is the location where the Moabite stone or the Mesha stela was discovered August 19th, 1868 by Frederick Klein.
Mm.
It was shown to him. A big battle erupts over who's going to own it, who's going to gain possession of it. Ultimately, it's blown to smithereens, Jono, by angry Bedouin who basically are snubbing their nose at these European groups, saying, we're not going to let you have it. If we can't have it, you can't have it. And they heat up.
We'll all have a piece
Oh,
each.
they blow it to pieces.
Heat it up over a fire until it's red hot, and then they pour cold water over it and shatters.
Golly.
And so there's pieces everywhere. Now, it was
Yep.
found at Diban, at Tel Diban. Who knows? Maybe they blew it up at Tel
Yep.
Diban as well. So to pick up because not all the pieces were found, right?
That's
And not
right.
all the pieces were found. To pick up a piece of basalt at Tel Diban, you may be holding an original piece of the
That's right.
Mesha Stela. It's not improbable. So that's why Dave did that. That's why you and I did that.
Yep.
We're going to be going there, and we're going to be going to other places of high significance as well. Not just to the Moses Scroll, to the Torah, like Mount Nebo.
That's right.
We're going to be going there. We're going to be looking out over the land of Israel as Moses would have seen it.
Yep.
Now, one of the other things that we do, Ross, and of course, as you've already mentioned, talking about the Siloam inscription, Hezekiah's tunnel, and so on and so forth, the city of David in Jerusalem, we will absolutely be returning there and spending some
Oh,
time.
wait. Yeah.
Um,
I can't wait for you're going through the tunnel with me. You have to
yeah,
now. I
no,
mean, you have to.
I,
I know you don't want to, but
I'll tell you what. If we get a couple of people to carry me on a stretcher so that I don't have to stand up,
okay.
I'm absolutely. If I can do it lying down, hey, that's a great idea. I just had that idea. This is good.
You might
And
be able to see things others have missed.
there you go. We'll organise that. Like clockwork, Stephen just said, did you check out the pool of Siloam excavation? Did you? Because we have been talking about Professor Galil of late on these programs and the sensational claims that he's been making in regards to Hezekiah's, to the city of David, inscriptions that he claims to have found there, writing
Right.
that no one else had detected before in Paleo-Hebrew. Can you give us any update on that? Is there
I
anything new?
tell you, I am ashamed to say that because the weather was so bad. And first of all, our time in Jerusalem was very limited because we were focused, at least for 2 full days, on the conference itself. And I had other important things to do with
Mm-hmm.
the Tylers, particularly while we were there. So I didn't get to go check out the excavation. I did see videos, but other people have seen those as well. But let me tell you,
Okay.
the reason you don't do tours in February, Jono,
It's
it was,
miserable and
oh
cold.
my God, it was raining and cold. And I'm pretty tough, that doesn't bother me, but
No, you're
it
from Louisiana. It's this is you're not used to this kind of weather. This
that's right.
it snows sometimes at that time of the year,
Yeah.
and so it was sleeting, it was raining, it was super super cold, and the last thing you want to do is be knee deep
But let
in
me let me add, let
water
me add something
in a dark
about the
tunnel.
Tanakh tour. One thing about the Tanakh tour that I am working on this is not a promise, Jono. Understand, and everyone listening. One thing that I did make while I was in Jerusalem was key contacts. Professor Ronnie Reich is the man for Siloam. I talked very closely, messaged back and forth with Professor Galil. What I would love to do is have one or both of those guys, and perhaps Eli Shukran, meet us at the City of David. I'm plenty capable of bringing people through the Siloam Tunnel network of tunnels and talk about the recent discoveries. But Jono, if we can do that, I really want to try to get those people to
Tell
meet
you
us.
what,
Either
that's
give us a short lecture.
G'day, James. Yes,
James,
I would love to do that, and
yep,
if we can pull that off, that'd be great. As if there wasn't already jam-packed full of goodies in the Tanakh tour, we can always squeeze something else in. G'day, James. James says, "Hey guys, just dipping in and out. Just dipping in and out. Stick around, James. What do you mean?" But want to say
a
hello
busy
to my
man.
best mate. Yay! There you go. That's great. I miss you too, James. It's been too long, my friend. It's been way too long. And I'd love to catch up with you again in Tamar in Israel at Iravot or Jerusalem. It's just been way too long. And now,
Here's
who is
another.
this?
This hey guys, I can't see the name. It says, I think Glenn will be connecting you soon about the tour, unless we
Oh, you
wouldn't
know who
have
that
to get
is?
back to.
That's Belinda. I bet you
Oh,
anything that's
okay,
Belinda.
Belinda and Glenn, the Wokes.
Glenn and
Okay,
Lynn. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can't see a name, but listen, as of now, for the tour in Egypt, Jordan, and Israel, there's no present requirements in terms of testing or anything. So, so don't let that hold you back.
Now, speaking of what, we got James here because I met Glenn and Belinda on the Tabor tour, which
Yep,
which is happening in March. Is that right?
that's right. He's full. He's full,
It's
but
full. It's full already. But
yep,
you know, for people who are interested in first century uh, Israel and so on and so forth, that is the tour. I mean, that really is. So, what is there is a website for next year, the following year. Anyway,
he may
but
already have the link posted on Blossoming Rose, but go to jamestabor.com
there you
and you'll
go.
be able to find the link on his blog to his tour for next year.
There it
But
is.
certainly,
So,
we've both been on that.
and P said, "Did you get back to Hezekiah's tunnel?" So no, but we absolutely intend to do that in November. We will. Yeah, not up yet. So he said next year's isn't up yet. If it was, it'd probably already be sold out. And gas waves at Dr. Tabor. There you go.
Yep.
So now, what we really want to talk about, and I'm glad that James is here because this involves United Israel. There was a thread while you were away in Israel that opened up on the United Israel group, a discussion, really interesting discussion, thanks
Yep.
to Brian Blair. And let me just bring this up in front of me. Over here. And of course, Mike Brown. Oh, g'day to Mike. Mike had a deposit down over the COVID period, and we had to cancel that tour. And he intends to come again, so we will look forward to meeting him.
Keep
But
talking. I'm going to grab coffee. I can hear you.
you go grab a coffee. The original post from Brian was in defense of sacrifices. Of course, there's been a lot of discussion. You and I have had a lot of discussion in regards to the sacrificial system, the Levitical, the priesthood, the monarchy, the temple, and so on and so forth. Was that all part of the original plan, particularly in light of the Moses Scroll, what the Moses Scroll claims? And as I often point out, the Moses Scroll does not necessitate any of those. It doesn't necessitate a sacrificial system. There is no place for that within the Moses Scroll. Therefore, it doesn't necessitate priests. It doesn't necessitate a monarchy, and certainly not a temple. It's interesting because there are challenges to those four ingredients from the prophets through the Tanakh. And you and I have had some interesting discussions about that. Brian offered some very valid challenges to that, and that's great. This is something that I love about United Israel and also the Truth to You listeners is that they don't just accept anything they hear.
That's right.
They want to challenge it, and they want to study it, and they want to offer some pushback on that. And we certainly welcome that. And within the thread of this particular post, Mike Brown came in and offered a comment as well. And one of the questions that he proposed, and I thought this was just a brilliant question, and I'll read this if I may. He said the United Israel website on the About page, he said, under what we affirm states the following, quote, we affirm the truths of the Hebrew Scriptures. Additionally, on the same page under the what is the Hebrew faith, it states, quote, people often ask who we are, what we are. How do we define ourselves in terms of our religious faith? The answer is simple, as it is profound. We hold to the Hebrew faith as reflected in the Hebrew Bible, or what is often called the Old Testament. Now, he goes on to say, or rather to ask the question, Mike Brown does. He says, my question to UIWU is, what do you mean when you use the terms Hebrew Scriptures and Hebrew Bible? Now, I think it's fairly clear that in this context, when you say the Hebrew Bible, you've already defined it on the page as what some people refer to as the Old Testament. But what I'd like to focus in on is what is meant by the use of the term Hebrew Scriptures, because that's a slightly different question, and it's a question that has different answers over different periods of time. It's particularly interesting when we talk about things like the Moses Scroll or the Dead Sea Scrolls, most certainly. And if James is still here, that's great. I mean, he's really the man to talk to in this regard. What did they regard as sacred scriptures? What was the Hebrew Scriptures to them? And so I have some questions about that. Now, before we even jump into that, it is necessary to mention that the Bibles that we have, that everybody has in their house, right? Whether it's a Christian Bible, if it's just the Hebrew Bible, every single Bible is based on the Aleppo Codex and the Leningrad Codex. Correct me if I misspeak here at all, Ross.
Primarily the Leningrad Codex, the Tanakh.
Primarily.
The Hebrew Scriptures, almost without exception, are based almost exclusively off of the Leningrad Codex as a base text, right? Because
well, now, when you say exclusively, let me ask you about that. My understanding was that primarily it was the Aleppo Codex, but that the Torah portion of our Bibles was taken from the Leningrad Codex because that is missing from the Aleppo Codex.
No, Leningrad Codex is the primary
ahead.
source. Yeah. So when you talk about the Leningrad Codex, it's often referred to as by the initial L for Leningrad. It's also called B19A. And that text was originally brought to the fore in the 1800s by a man by the name of Abraham Furkovich. You and I have discussed him a while back. Yeah. So Furkovich brought this document, as I recall, around 1838 to Odessa. And then ultimately it ends up in the Russian National Library. That's gone through a couple of different names. But this particular text was lent to Professor Kahl at Leipzig in like 1937. Now, I'm going to build a case here for what we currently have in our Bibles. And that particular text began to be used as the basis for the Hebrew Bible because he worked on producing a text. And I actually jotted down a couple of notes. He actually began to work on a couple of texts. Let's see how long. 1935, it was lent to the Old Testament seminar at the University of Leipzig for 2 years. Professor Paul Kahl, Kahle, supervised a transcription of the Hebrew text, which became Biblia Hebraica. Now, what do you do before 1935? And then when this comes out, like for instance, I have the BHS text, which is Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia. You have the Biblia Hebraica Dotans in the Leningrad. Look at this. This Bible is called the Biblia Hebraica Leningradensia. A lot of these German texts. Now, the reason they currently use this particular text is because it is the Leningrad Codex is the oldest complete
Complete. Mm.
version of the Hebrew Bible. Now, you mentioned the Aleppo Codex. The Aleppo Codex and the Rabbinic Bibles 1 and 2 from the 1500s, those are also based on Masoretic rabbinic Bibles, if you will. Some of the text, the Bibles that we had before the BHS text comes out based on the Leningrad were based on some of these earlier texts, but they're not nearly as good and accurate as the Leningrad. So if you ask anybody, and we'll talk about another claim that's coming out in the news now, if you have to ask anybody, what's the oldest complete Hebrew Bible? And everyone who knows anything will tell you B19A, the Leningrad Codex. Other Bibles, like the Aleppo only has about 40% of it that's come forward. And most of the Torah is missing from the Aleppo Codex. In fact, there's a great book that I encourage people to get on the Aleppo Codex.
It's a fascinating story.
It's called The Aleppo Codex, The True Story of Obsession, Fate, and the Pursuit of an Ancient Bible by Maddie Friedman. Fabulous text. But let me just,
go
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it is a fascinating story, the Aleppo Codex, and the history thereof. It's actually a Karaite document. It was penned by a Karaite scribe and preserved. He even spent time at the Karaite synagogue in Jerusalem, the oldest functioning synagogue in Jerusalem. And we often pop in there on the Tanakh tour. Now, let me just clarify something, because I've misunderstood. Are there any differences, even minor, that you may know of between the Leningrad and the Aleppo, or do they in their in the Ketuvim and the Nevi'im, do they absolutely agree with each other? Are they identical?
No. And
Go
let
ahead.
me say one more thing about Leningrad, and we'll jump about the other ones as well. So the Leningrad, again, the oldest complete Hebrew Bible, meaning it has the entire Bible, Genesis through Ezra, Nehemiah. By the way, that's the order of the books are different in the Leningrad Codex and the Aleppo Codex. They're both the same in the order and arrangement of the books. Same order of the books for the Torah. The prophets are in the same order, but the Ketuvim, the writings in both the Aleppo Codex and the Leningrad Codex, are ordered differently. So whereas if you pick up a modern Jewish Bible, it's ordered such that Divrei Hayamim, the Chronicles, the words of the days, is a literal translation, Chronicles 1 and 2 or A and B, they're last in the Hebrew canon, according to modern Hebrew Bibles. But that does not match our oldest Bible. So let's talk about dates. You would think that, the oldest Bible would go way, way, way back. But the earliest witness that has the whole Bible, the whole Tanakh, goes back to 1009 AD or CE. 1009. Some people say 1008. I'm going to go with Emmanuel Tove.
So it's 1,000 years old, is what he's saying. Sorry to interrupt. Now, let me just to illustrate this just a little further. The Leningrad Codex is not as old as the Aleppo. The Aleppo is another 80 years on top of the older than the Aleppo, if I understand,
That's
if I
about
recall
right.
correctly.
Almost,
okay.
80 to 100.
Now, when we go to the Israel Museum, and you have to go to the Israel Museum on the Tanakh tour, there's so many things that have to be seen and pointed out and discussed. We always go to the Shrine of the Book, and within the Shrine of the Book is the Isaiah scroll that was found in Qumran, Dead Sea Scroll. And underneath that display is a section sort of down in a cave, if you like, that's dedicated to the Aleppo Codex. It is so because the Aleppo Codex is regarded as the oldest that we have. I mean, and again, not complete,
Yeah,
The Torah portion is in someone's safe somewhere, and we don't know where. Or so says some theories.
that's true.
And I like to believe that that's true. I like to think that we'll come across it one day. But it's the oldest, and so there's an enormous amount of importance placed upon the Aleppo Codex. Now, what I didn't know until very recently, can we talk about this?
What,
Uh,
let's stay on
well,
Aleppo. Before you jump off Aleppo,
okay,
can
go
I say
ahead.
one thing?
Go ahead.
So this time when I went to the Israel Museum, Bridget has been with me. This was her second
Hey, Bridget,
time. And
and hey,
Bridget,
Patty. By the way, Patty just tuned in, so
hey
she
Patty.
says, "Hey guys, I want to say good day." Yeah, so Bridget,
So
yep.
so Bridget is the kind of person that you bring somewhere and she reads every placard. Like, and she's a fast reader. Well, I've gone through the Israel Museum Shrine of the Book downstairs, looked at the Aleppo Codex. Wow, that's cool. But I've never read every one of the. So Bridget calls me over and she said, "Hey, Ross, check this out." And she had read, and she knows from being with me for 37 years now, she's going to make it short for me. She said, "Did you know that they found a piece of the missing Torah? This guy had it in his possession for all these years. It was rescued from the fire." I said, "No, and it's in the Israel Museum." So, to your point, some have proposed, because we don't know what
Mm,
happened to the missing leaves of the Aleppo Codex. Now, this book I mentioned is very good and worth the read, but it's a fascinating story about this scroll. So, I mean, this codex. A codex
mm,
is a book as
the
opposed to a
book.
scroll.
Mm,
And but the thing about Aleppo, Leningrad dates to 1008, 1009 CE. The Aleppo Codex, we know this from the wording in the dedication pages in the front. The Aleppo dates to roughly 925
hmm
CE. So both of these are very good witnesses. Now, before the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, this is the earliest textual witnesses that we have to the Hebrew Bible,
mm.
incomplete, completed. We have translations. We have the Septuagint. We have the Vulgate. We have things like that. But as far as before the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, critics would look at, like people making fun of the Bible would say, it's 1,000 years old, guys. Quit trying to act like this goes back to the time of Moses. Dead Sea Scrolls kind of jolted people and made them say, well, maybe, and then people began to open up their study parameters and say, how well does my Hebrew Bible, which is based on this, correspond to the Hebrew Bible text that we have from, say, Qumran or whatever? Now, I'm sorry, I
So
didn't I didn't
from a
get that.
no, this is great. So exactly. So the 1,000-year-old text that we have at home
Yeah,
compared with the roughly 2,000-year-old text that was discovered in what was it, 1948,
1947. Yeah, 47,
47,
46, 47, winter of.
and then because there are both minor and significant differences and quite glaring omissions within these texts. Now, just to illustrate this, and I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. One of the Tanakh tours, and maybe was it 2019? I can't remember, but our friend, what was his name? Now I had it in my head, and now his name is gone. Um, do you remember who it was? We were taught. He was just a wealth of knowledge, and he was great to have on the tour. And we were looking at the Isaiah scroll, and he was telling us a whole lot of things that we'd never heard before. Um, when you know who I'm talking about, anyway, and when his name comes to mind, one of us will let you know. But he said one of the things that he pointed out was that there are significant, some interesting differences between the Isaiah
Yeah,
scroll that we're looking from the Dead Sea Scrolls and what we have in our Bibles from the Leningrad Codex.
yeah,
One of those examples was that now, when you guys were discussing this, Tovia and I were down in the underneath looking at the Aleppo Codex display, and when I came up, I was talking to some of you guys, and you mentioned that our friend had pointed out that, for example, the Isaiah scroll says, "Holy, holy is the Lord Almighty," whereas in our canonical text, it says "Holy, holy, holy" 3 times. Now, this sounds like a very small thing,
Yeah.
but in actual fact, there's some very interesting and elaborate commentary and explanation as to why it's mentioned 3 times and all this sort of stuff. And but not so in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Isaiah scroll text. Now, I mentioned this to Tovia as we were leaving, and he looked at me and said, "I don't know anything about that." And I said, "Well, this is what has been claimed." And he said, "We got to go back and have a look." So while you guys went on to the main museum to have a look at some fascinating things in there, Tovia and I went back, and thank God I had Tovia with me, because my Hebrew is not so great, and he was able to go through and read it and find where it
Yeah.
was and go. And he said, "Look at that! It's only mentioned twice. Well, how about that?" Now, it's not as if he didn't know there were some minor differences between
Yeah.
the scroll and the canonical text. But this was a very interesting one, and we did talk about that as we went to find you guys, and it always stuck in my mind. Now, the question becomes, to which text do you default?
Yeah.
Which one takes precedent? Because, as I've already mentioned, the Isaiah scroll, the Dead Sea Scrolls, are roughly 1,000 years older than that which we have in on our bookshelves. To which one do you default? Again, this may be a minor example, but when you investigate the Dead Sea Scrolls, when you read through them, particularly when you are comparing them to the text that we have, you will often encounter, as I just mentioned, some significant differences and some glaring omissions. Ross.
Yeah, so just what you're talking about goes in line with Timothy's question. He said, I was thinking something similar. If you have something that shows an evolution of thought, how do you know which point in time to follow
Mm,
is earliest the best? Well, that's an excellent question.
mm.
And what that leads us to is this particular idea. What the purpose, people hear me or you, they may hear us say something about textual criticism. Textual criticism is not, here's what it's not. It's not just criticizing the text. Like somebody might say, well, Ross, I don't like the way you're going with some of this because you've become a text critic. What textual criticism is about is analyzing textual witnesses
And
in
investigating.
search of
Mm,
trying to discover or discern the source, the earliest text. How do we know in the evolution of things which one comes first?
mm.
Now, before we get into looking at other textual witnesses, you know that within the Bible we have examples of this. Let me give you some that I came across today. I was thinking about this and I looked them up in Emmanuel Tove. If you look at Psalm 18 and you compare it with 2 Samuel 22, those are
Mm.
the same text, except there are differences. In other words, if you put them side by side, that is within our Tanakh, you have variations between the two. Another example, Psalm 14 and Psalm 53, Ezra chapter 2 and Nehemiah chapter 7,
Hmm.
on and on and on
Well,
and
well. How
on.
about this one? What about comparing just Samuel Kings and Chronicles, Ross? This book that you
Absolutely.
highly recommend
Absolutely.
really does open your eyes in regards to different traditions
Yeah.
and the way that the stories do differ, and the way that they are recorded.
Yeah.
This is very eye opening, and I highly recommend it. And you can get it on Amazon.
I
This one
use it.
here,
I use it all the time. It's on my desk over there. Now,
and
ju-
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that first of all, when we look at the Hebrew Bible, the text, and back to the original question about United Israel, our focus is on a certain collection of text, which is the Hebrew Bible, meaning our focus is not on the Christian Bible, the New Testament. Our focus is on the books which have been considered sacred by, for lack of a better way to put it, the Jewish people for a very long time. Now, what
Hmm.
happens because of that is you have people, and this was Brian Blair's point, at least in part. Wait a minute. Who are you to challenge what we have accepted as authoritative for thousands of years. Well, there's some truth to that, in that these Hebrew biblical texts have been maybe not in the strictest terms of canon, but if you look at even BCE, the books of the Hebrew Bible have already been somewhat together, meaning they believed in the writings of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Nahum, Micah. In fact, Josephus in the first century describes 22 books that are considered sacred. Now
22.
he says 22. It's the same material that we have in our current Hebrew Bible, but the order and arrangement is different. So just like I mentioned earlier that our current Hebrew Jewish Bibles end in Chronicles, Divrei Hayamim. But in these earliest witnesses of the complete Tanakh, the order is different. So the order is different. What I'm beginning to want to know is, how do we really identify that original text? So if we base our beliefs and our fundamentalism on, when I grew up in a Christian church, I held up a King James Bible. I still have some of them behind me. And I held them up and said, this is the holy, inspired, inerrant, authoritative word of the living God. It is
There it
God
is.
breathed.
Fell out of the sky.
Yep.
Fell out of the clouds.
Yep.
Inerrant.
And
And
it is
don't
inerrant.
question it.
It is inerrant. But when we face the text with honesty, when we look at the text in a very careful, analytical way, what we find are that there are differences. Academics would call it discrepancies or corruptions to the text, within the text itself. So you have various versions from antiquity that, thank God, have been preserved within the Pentateuch, for instance. And I've pointed a lot of these out in my classes. Well, one option, Jono, is to put your thumbs in your ears and hands like this and say, I don't want to look, I don't want to listen. That's one view. Another view is to say, what do you got? Well, if I have a text in Exodus that doesn't agree with what I read in Deuteronomy, I have to face that. I have to be analytical, critical, and I want to call it being honest. Some people say, well, I just want to go with what the sages say. But here's a question for you. Do the sages not ask questions about these difficult matters? I think they do. I posted something on Facebook earlier on our United Israel page, and this is what it says. Let's see where I found that. It is, bear with me one second.
While you're looking that up, let me say good
Yeah.
day to Dan, who tuned in and said hello. And while you're finding this quote, I just want to say, CJ, I don't know what you're saying, and I don't think that we agree with your comment. Everything that supposed Israel holds to is a fake. No, I don't know what you're referring to. I'm not sure that I want to know. Supposed Israel.
Yeah, don't give it any more attention. Okay, so
Yeah,
here's
goodbye,
the
my friend.
thing. This is the quote. Now this is from 1753 from Benjamin Kennicott, and he said in his dissertation, and now, if there certainly are errors in the printed text of the Old Testament, the Tanakh, may we not be permitted to discover them? So I think that's
read it again. Sorry, read that again. That's great.
All right. It says, and now, if there certainly are errors in the printed text of the Old Testament, may we not be permitted to discover them? So
Is there anything wrong with that?
I want to look at and entertain and question, everything. Now, here's an example, something that's recently, I say within the last 5 years. There was a stage in my quest where I said the Hebrew Bible is supreme, meaning the Hebrew text, the Masoretic text, as we have received it, wins out over the Septuagint, the Vulgate, everything. Okay? Now, What that means to me is this. Here's the question that it brings up. One of the things that I'd like to see is when I look at this, what about the Septuagint? Now, we could say, wait a minute, the Septuagint is Greek and it's a translation of the Masoretic, so it's wrong, right? That's one conclusion that people often come to. Now listen to this, Jono. One of the things that is important is to recognize that when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, some of the text of the Tanakh might be in Greek or in a Hebrew that matches more closely to the Hebrew of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Are you listening or
Sure.
are you reading the comment?
I've got one eye on the comments.
No,
I've got one eye
yeah,
on you and one ear. Yeah. No,
yeah.
I'm hearing you.
So, in other words, we can't dismiss textual witnesses like the Septuagint because now we have, for instance, Jeremiah. There's a text in Jeremiah that that is found in Qumran, written in Hebrew, that aligns more with the Septuagint Greek than it does with the Masoretic
Right.
text. So, the
And that's
question
got to be
becomes,
recognized. Yeah.
which is the oldest, which is the earliest. And I'm currently teaching in Jeremiah, so that raises some questions. So
Yeah, so
whenever
let
we
me just
yep,
can I just recap what you just said just to make sure I
yep,
understand it? What you're saying is that there are texts found at Qumran that gel more with the Septuagint or the Greek translation of the Tanakh than the Hebrew translation of the Tanakh in our canonical text. So the question becomes: is there more
yeah,
within the Greek translation that is more closely preserved to that which we find at Qumran, or just generally, than is within our Hebrew? Because quite often we just write off the what's known as the Septuagint as something that's not quite as accurate as the Hebrew. According to the Qumran fragments, that may not necessarily be the case. This is your point, right?
that's right. That's right.
Okay.
And so my question becomes, and it goes back to the comment earlier from Timothy Daly. It's not necessarily that we have to say older is better, but when you study the evolution of the text, I can tell you now that I trust the Hebrew behind the English better than I trust the English. Now,
Hmm.
if within that question of what is underneath the Hebrew, or their earlier text of Hebrew, I want to read them all. I want to look at all of them. I want to see,
Right.
how did we come to this? And within the Pentateuch, if I have one story in the Pentateuch which says one thing and another story within the Pentateuch that says another, I want to ask the question, particularly when they don't agree, which one's
Hmm.
earlier? So, for
Yeah.
instance, our two versions of the Ten
Hmm.
Commandments, Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5, don't agree. That's the Ten Commandments, Jono.
Hmm.
So
How
is
many
one of
letters,
them,
Ross? How many words and letters are different between the
I,
two?
I normally know this.
Give me a round figure.
I think it's 186 different. There's 186 more words in one than the
Words.
other. Now,
Yeah.
the question becomes, how which one is original? Both of them are presented as, this is the word that God spoke from Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai. So I want to
This
know.
is the revelation narrative upon which the entire Bible is based. If there was no divine revelation at Horeb, or was it Sinai, then
Yeah,
then we have no Bible. Then we have no Bible. This is the thing that sets this apart from all other revelation narratives, is that it was purportedly spoken by Elohim to the people audibly, that they all bore witness to this and carried on this tradition going forward. Now, that being the case, the most incredible moment in human history, I would argue, um, and we have two records of it, and they don't agree. What's
yeah.
going on? Go ahead.
Yep. So we have within the text of the Bible various ancient versions. This is why I love the Hebrew Bible. I mean, I have the
Hmm.
entire Hebrew Bible supposedly on a microchip here. Now, I can't
There you go.
verify that, but they got my money because I think that's a
Yeah.
cool bracelet. I
is cool.
love the Hebrew Bible. I love all the
Mm,
variation within it. I love the tension in the text. I love that some texts say, you must bring your sacrifices and give a sweet smelling savor to the Lord. And then I love that there's another verse that says, God never wanted sacrifices. I
hmm
love the tension. But when I'm looking for what's the authentic, original, earliest message from God, I have questions. So when
mm,
I see that I have different sources that went into the building of our wonderful Bible that we have, doesn't scare me, but I want to
mm,
be honest with the text. I want to be honest with Moses, honest with God, honest to God. I really
mm.
do. So I want to
And
know.
particularly when it comes to the 10 words. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I want to know, where does my Bible come from? I mean, I remember as a child, I still have the Bible that I got for Christmas of 1972. That's the earliest Bible in my collection. I may have had one in 1970, but I was just a kid, 6, 7 years old. And,
Mm,
and I still have that Bible where I marked that King James Bible. I've loved it all my life. But I had no idea as a 7-year-old boy that behind that text was a Hebrew text. And as a 20-year-old man, I had no idea that behind the various Hebrew texts of the Bible, there were differences and there were variations. And this book that I've had this book for a while, and I've used it sort of as you can see all the markings in it.
mm.
I've used it as a reference book. But I took this thing out this week because of something announced in the news, and I said,
Right?
I'm going to read it. I'm going to understand it, and I'm getting into, very much so, textual criticism of the Hebrew Bible, meaning I want to look at these various Dead Sea Scrolls, Vulgate, Septuagint, Masoretic text, all the Masoretic notes. Man, look, yep. Go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, you shared an article from thetorah.com, which is an excellent website, by the way. I strongly advise and encourage listeners and viewers to go and read some of the many, many articles that are
Mhm.
available at thetorah.com. And you shared one with me in regards to Joseph recently, I don't know, about a month ago, because we both have some interest there at the moment. We can talk about that another
Yep.
time. It was by, if I recall correctly, what is our friend's name? The
Mark
contributor to the
Brettler.
study notes, Mark Brettler. Mark
Yeah.
Brettler in Israel there, and one of the things that he just drops into that article, and I'm just paraphrasing, is the understanding that there were different collections, different canons, different traditions by different movements, if you like, in different areas of Israel, of what was regarded as the Hebrew scriptures. And he mentions that within the collection found in Qumran, it seems to know very little, if anything, about the narrative of Joseph. Fascinating, and that's a different discussion altogether. But this is the case. So when it comes to talking about what exactly is regarded as Hebrew scriptures, you have to take all of this into account and give it some consideration and
Yeah.
come to some conclusions that are outside the box. Now, you're about to discuss, and I'm very eager to hear about this, what is known as, am I pronouncing this right, the Sassoon Codex.
If you're
Is that
not
right?
pronouncing it right, you're pronouncing it exactly as I do. So let's just go
Okay.
with it. Yeah.
Let's go with that.
Codex
Now, the
Sassoon.
Sassoon, we've already spoken about the Leningrad Codex, upon which all of our Bibles are based. The Aleppo Codex, which is older but is missing the Torah portion in some private collectors' safe somewhere, no doubt. And now, the Aleppo, which is supposedly older. And we understood, or I understood, to be the oldest, which is why there is a massive section in the Shrine of the Book of the Israel Museum dedicated to the Aleppo, and we'll be seeing that when we go on tour with Tanakh tours. But apparently, I was wrong. There is an older codex,
No, you were right. You
possibly.
were right. I'm sorry. I think you were right. I think based on everything I've read today,
Mm,
it's tricky, the language they use. It's a
go
lot of
ahead.
media hype. You're exactly right. As far as we know, remember now, The Aleppo Codex is not a witness presently to the text of the Pentateuch because that is mostly missing. There's a little bit of the end of the Pentateuch and this small fragment of portion of Exodus
That Bridget pointed out. Yeah.
that was found. But most of the Pentateuch, the Torah, is missing from Aleppo. But we do think that the Aleppo is earlier than Sassoon
Oh, is that right?
because at least in the opening dedication of this particular manuscript, it refers to at least it doesn't say necessarily the Aleppo, but it's dated about the same time. It could be people are debating this now. Is it earlier? Is it later? But it is almost complete. Now, here's what we do know. It is about 100 years older than the Leningrad Codex.
Leningrad. There we go.
But the Leningrad still has this. The Leningrad has all of the Tanakh, whereas the Codex Sassoon, now listen, if people are going to Google this, they have to be particularly careful. Don't just Google Codex Sassoon. Now, you'll probably get the top hits are about the right one, but there are others because it's named for the last prominent member, owner of this particular manuscript, not the current owner, but the last his name was David Sassoon. He lived from 1880, I wrote it in my notes, to 1942.
Right, and he acquired this text in the 1920s. Is that right, if I remember correctly?
That's right. That's right. He acquired it in 1920 for 350 pounds. Now, this document...
He acquired it for 350 pounds?
Yep.
Wow,
in
that's so cheap.
1929, though. So
Even
that's...
so.
yeah, wow. But still... So it was kept in his family. Now, what I was going to say before I interrupted myself, you have to look up Codex Sassoon 1053. That's the official number on it. Because there are because it was part of his manuscript collection. This guy must have, had quite an extensive collection. It's the last entry. If you look at the catalog of the manuscripts that Sassoon owned, this is number 1053. And it contains all but there are roughly 12 pages, 12 missing leaves in this codex. And so it begins, it's got most of the missing pages are from the beginning. So I think it picks up like in Genesis chapter 9. Then there's a little bit of maybe Exodus that's missing. I'm still researching this, but I don't have it all. Yeah.
Okay.
But otherwise,
so it's almost complete.
Almost complete. That's why these newspaper media reports are saying, how are they calling it? The earliest, most complete Hebrew Bible.
I see.
So the Leningrad Codex is later. It's 100 years later, but it's complete.
It's complete. Okay.
Earlier, and it's not. It may be even earlier than the Aleppo, but it's not quite complete.
Here is a question. Here is a question that I have, and I don't know if you know the answer, and it may be sometime before we know. Are there any textual differences between the Leningrad, the Aleppo to the Sassoon? Do we know that?
I can't say for certain, but I would bet all the money that I own, which is not much, that there are, because every text has differences. This idea. I used to say this, every jot and every tittle, that there's no difference, that you can run computer programs and it's going to hunt down and find the name of the next president and, all these details about who he's married to and what kind of car he drives.
All that sort of
stuff.
No, but listen, Ross, no, but so this is the thing, by the way. Right, no, you don't throw that out.
I have all those books. I've read them all and believed them at some point. But
here's the thing. I think that one of the reasons, because I've been thinking about this, one of the reasons that we generally know so little about the contents of the Dead Sea Scrolls is that it is told to us that, the Dead Sea Scrolls is such a great witness of our canonical text. It's identical, except for a little bit of but it's basically identical, and it doesn't have any differences except for a little bit. But don't worry about that. And it's just a witness to the accuracy and so on and so forth. But in actual, and so we hear that, and therefore, Ross, we don't go and compare it for ourselves and read it for ourselves and have a look at what is omitted and have a look at where the differences do lie, because we're told that it's basically the same. So don't worry about it, except that it's all great because this is just proof of how precise the tradition of transmission, the accuracy of transmission, has been carried out throughout the centuries. It's not really all that,
Well,
Ross, and I think we need to pay a
let
little
me
bit more
give both
attention. Go ahead.
sides. Let me give both sides a little up. So first of all, when you think about the transmission of texts which go back thousands of years purportedly, it's
Mm,
pretty accurate.
it's
In other
pretty
words,
good. Yeah,
when you
that's
take
true.
when you take the Hebrew text from Qumran and you look at 1Q Isaiah which is the great Isaiah scroll, and you compare it to the Masoretic version of the Isaiah scroll, it's pretty close. It's
Mm,
pretty close
mm,
in all of its details. On the other hand, to say that it is absolutely, without a doubt, inerrant and there are not even one jot or one tittle, that is not true. That is far from the truth. We have hundreds of variations. We have so many variations within the bill, and some are minor.
mm.
But nonetheless, like for instance, I was reading today. You have names that are spelled. One name might begin with a resh, and another text within the Bible starts the same name, meaning clearly pointing to the same guy or person with a dalet. Well, the reason that textual corruption came in is because a resh and a dalet look different.
Very, very
So,
similar. Yeah.
they look similar.
Mm,
So you're going to have textual corruptions and variations of a minor nature that over the whole text of the Bible can be quite substantive in total, in numbers of
mm-hmm.
these. So when we talk about textual criticism and searching for which is the more accurate, which is the earliest textual witness, I don't think we should be lazy. I don't think we should think we're
That's the best
doing
way. Yeah.
God a favor. Like I'm not doing God a favor when I say I believe in the total inerrant, authoritative. That's just it's not going to hold up. What I
Mm,
want to do is say, I have an Isaiah in my Bible that's based on a Masoretic tradition that at least goes back to the Middle Ages, quite possibly is built on earlier traditions, earlier texts, which might go back to the 3rd century BCE. But what I want to do is I want to compare that text to a textual witness that's carbon dated from the caves of Qumran that's 2,200 years old, right?
mm, mm.
Now, I'm not going to say that, back to the question we had earlier, is earlier always better? I tell you what, I lean towards at least giving the weight to something which is quite ancient and
You have to.
untampered.
At the very, very least, Ross, it is upon us to wrestle with these texts and not, as you just pointed out, not be lazy, but at the very least take it into consideration. It's
Yeah,
older. Now, while we're talking about that, if it's older, what if we found something that was in, say, Paleo Hebrew,
yeah,
for example, that claimed to be even older again? What if it was entirely in the first person?
yeah,
What if it was a text that, say, had 10 commandments clearly delineated and not 9 as we
yeah.
have in Deuteronomy and Exodus? What
What
if
if
it
it
actually
had
had
the
correspond
blessings? What if it had the
and the
blessings
curses,
when
the
our
corresponding.
text? Yeah.
This is it. Oh, by the way, now because I'm over this, when people say, "Oh, but there are blessings in Deuteronomy,"
Oh
no,
yeah.
when we're talking, because I have to keep saying this, we've said it
It
before, but
happened
people get
last week, by
confused.
the way.
Did it happen last week? When we say that the Moses scroll has corresponding blessings that are missing from the text that the rabbinic scribes attest to in what is it, Sotar 7:5, what we are saying is the blessed bees, not the consequences of the blessings, which is fine. Yeah, sure, that's
Yeah.
in Deuteronomy, and that's great. We're talking about the actual blessed bees, the ones that are corresponding to each of the 10 words. We can talk about that again in detail
Yeah, we're
later.
gonna
But
have
when we say
to.
the
We're gonna have
because
to because people still
people
don't
keep
get it.
saying they don't
They
get it, but
actually write, and it's like they tag me in the post. Ross, you may not know this, but there is a chapter 28 in Deuteronomy, and it has the blessings. I'm like, oh,
you
I
probably
didn't know
never
there
read
were
that before.
28
Yeah,
chapters.
no, that's
Anyway,
you've
but
never read that.
they're missing the
Um,
point. Yeah.
Now, so my point is that if you come across a text such as this, is it not upon you to take it into consideration at the very least? Take a moment to give it the benefit of the doubt. You don't have to accept it, but just entertain it from that perspective. Give it the benefit of the doubt, and what exactly does that mean? And I think you would be pleasantly exhilarated. I certainly was, and continue to be when it comes to the Moses Scroll. When you read it, and you from that perspective, it becomes a fascinating text for that reason. So this is the long way to answer the questions that were raised on that particular excellent thread, and very valid questions. Before we jump off the Sassoon,
Yep.
I don't know if we mentioned. You said it was purchased in the mid 1920s for 300 and something pounds. It is going, I think, in May, going to auction. It's being
Yep.
sold, and they expect to fetch how much?
30 to 50 million. Now, let me just say, wait, let me give you the quick rundown. Purchased in 1929 for 350 pounds by David Solomon Sassoon, passed down in his family until 1978. The British Railroad pension bought it for 3.19 million, and then the current owner, Jacques Safra, bought it for 4.19 million in 1980 something. So
Wow.
anyway, so it's been in his possession, and now he's going to sell it. This guy is expecting now. This manuscript is going to go around the world. It's on tour, right? It's on display right now at Sotheby's in London. It's going
You
next to
have
Tel
connections there.
Aviv. What's that?
You have connections there.
Oh, that's right. That's right. The Tylers and I went to Sotheby's when we were in London, and I'm going back.
Hmm.
And so it's going to Tel Aviv next, and then it goes to, I think, Dallas, and then Los Angeles, and then New York. And it's going on the auction block after showing it at all these places on May the 16th in New York. Now, I would
All right.
love to be at one of those
This
auctions,
That's
particularly at
right. This is why people need to go to Ross's Patreon page and subscribe, because he needs $50 million to buy this text. It's
that's all I
absolutely
need.
imperative. It's
Yep,
absolutely imperative that it's on the bookshelf behind him. We need that. It's older than the Leningrad Codex, almost complete. It's only $50 million, and I know that our viewers can find the change in your lounge.
that's
Come
right.
on,
Scan it
every
and
little bit
just
helps.
yeah, that's right.
Scan it
That's
and
right. Well,
subscribe to Ross's Patreon.
call me if you'd rather write a check, right?
That's fine.
No, hey, look, it's been fun, Jono. I know that see my voice is already sounding better. May God continue to make
There you
it
go.
clearer and
Just
clearer
needed a
by
bit of an exercise. There you go.
that's
Yeah, well,
right.
that's
I
right.
just
Now
need
let's just talk about that before we go, because you are up to, I think, episode 11. Is that right?
something
Episode
like that.
11
Yep.
of your discussion on the book of Jeremiah, which is more than fascinating. Dear viewers, if you have not yet been keeping up to date with those classes on Jeremiah, you're only about 10 in, and so you can binge it between now
That's
and
right.
Saturday, and get into it, because it really
Hey,
is exceptional.
we're in the days of Jehoiakim, and let me just say that we're getting to the place within the Bible where within the Tanakh it's going to show how textual criticism is important, because we're going to have a story coming up this week or next Shabbat that
Mm.
clearly within the text itself it says, listen, that version was destroyed and it had to be remade. Those kind of things happen, and the Bible tells on itself. The Bible has that in the story. So we're going to talk. I think the primary focus of my class this coming Shabbat is going to be on Jeremiah's famous temple sermon. And I
Right.
cannot wait.
Is this can I Can I ask you, are you referring to the temple sermon where he almost got stoned? The people wanted to stone him, and then someone intervened and said, hey, you remember Micah?
Yep, that's
Is this the one?
exactly right. Yep.
This is
Because
one of my
you know
favorite
why?
pieces.
Because Jeremiah in his day, I bet you people were saying, "Oh, wait a minute, Jeremiah, on your website, you say that that the priesthood is this and that the Torah is this, and now you're saying something is different. You're saying that the
Mm-hmm.
sacrifices may not be going back to Moses. And wait a minute, what exactly do you mean, Jeremiah? We're going to kill you. You said you wanted to destroy the temple was going to be destroyed. Remember all that? Sounds a
Mm-hmm.
lot like what I'm doing. So I hope there's nobody outside waiting to kill me because I'm about to go Jeremiah on these people. You hear me,
There
Jono?
we go. I'm looking forward to it. That's this Saturday, episode 11, class 11, on the book of Jeremiah. You don't want to miss out on that. That is us for this week, and it's so good to be back with you, my friend. I've really missed you,
Man, I miss you
and
too.
we'll be doing this again. Hopefully this time next week. We certainly intend to. In the meantime, dear listeners, get your deposits down for TanakhTours.com. TanakhTours.com, 2 legs of the tour: Egypt, Jordan first, and then Israel. You can do one or the other. You can do both. A lot of people are doing both. If you do both, you'll get a $100 combination discount. So there you
That's
go.
right.
And the Israel Jordan tour is filling faster than the Israel tour. So you want to be quick if you want to be on that one. And as I said, Ross's Patreon page, go there, subscribe. He needs $50 million so he can buy the Sassoon Codex. It's very important. We're going to be back this time next week, dear listeners, dear viewers. Got to get used to being on video, Ross.
Viewers. That's right.
Yeah, viewers, dear viewers. All right.
That's
All right,
right.
you guys.
Hey, Jono, good to be
Yes, mate.
back, man. I missed you. Let's do this next week. Talk to everybody later.
Done. All right. Cheers.